One of Canada's most well-known singer-songwriters is being remembered and celebrated today. Musical legend Gordon Lightfoot passed away in a Toronto hospital last night. The Orillia, Ontario native was 84 years old. Now, earlier this month, Lightfoot cancelled his upcoming concert dates. Joining us to take a look back on his life and legacy is Alan Cross, music writer, host of the syndicated show, The Ongoing History of New Music. He is in Ontario. Hello, Alan.
Hi. This is such a sad thing, but we knew it was coming. And to be honest, this might have happened 20 years ago had he not gotten very lucky. In 2003, Gordon Lightfoot had an aortic aneurysm rupture on, an aorta rupture on him as a result of an aneurysm, and he almost died and was in a coma for 6 weeks and took 2 years to recover. But he did, and went back on tour. So we're actually very lucky to have gotten an extra 20 years out of Gordon Lightfoot.
What do you think it is about Gordon Lightfoot that makes him so special? Because if he had died back then, the reaction would have been pretty similar to what it is now, right?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think what we have to go back to the 1960s. Gordon Lightfoot comes out at a time when Canada also comes out, 1967, and the Centennial, this young country. It's got its own flag for the first time. And there's this cohort of young musicians, and they all seem to be singer-songwriters. Neil Young, Buffy St. Marie, Joni Mitchell, and Gordon Lightfoot, that all rise to prominence at around this same time. And they became the nucleus of this Canadian singer-songwriter sound, with a lot of them writing about Canadian things. No one more so than Lightfoot himself. When we get to the 1970s, Lightfoot, who, unlike Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, decided to stay in Canada and continue to write songs about Canada. He was inspired by so many things coast to coast in this country, which turned him into an international star. If you were around during the 70s, which was Gordon Lightfoot's commercial peak, I mean, he was massive. He was ubiquitous. He was absolutely everywhere. There were singles on the radio all the time, singles on the charts, not just in Canada, but in countries around the world. A number one song or two in the United States, selling millions of records. He was absolutely huge. And I'm going to give you something. This will put things into perspective. Gordon Lightfoot became one of the world's most revered singer-songwriters. Here's a list of performers who covered his songs: Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Barbra Streisand, Neil Young, Glenn Campbell, The Grateful Dead, Olivia Newton-John, Jimmy Buffett, Sarah McLachlan, John Mellencamp, John Mathis, Paul Weller, the tragically hit Jim Croce, and a dozen other big names. And I left the punchline for the end. His biggest fan was Bob Dylan. Now, let's look at Dylan. Arguably the greatest singer-songwriter the universe has ever created. Here's a quote from Bob Dylan. "I can't think of any Gordon Lightfoot song I don't like. Every time I hear a song of his, it's like I wish it would last forever." Then comes this line: "Lightfoot became a mentor for a long time." Now let that sink in for just a second. Bob Dylan, the greatest singer-songwriter of all time, looked up to Gordon Lightfoot as a mentor, as someone who could teach him something. This is Bob Dylan. And that pretty much tells you everything you need to know about Gordon Lightfoot as a songwriter.
And do you think that's why so many people covered his music? And I mean, did he ever complain that people played so many of his songs, but tried to do it their way?
I don't think so, because anytime another artist wants to cover your song and give it their own twist, that's a huge form of flattery. And I never heard or read or Lightfoot saying that he minded it. And listen, when somebody covers your song and becomes successful, you make a lot of money. So I'm sure he was. There's one story from 1987. He sued a songwriter named Michael Masser, who accused him of stealing 24 bars of "If You Could Read My Mind" for a song he had written. in the 1970s. Now, this song was trotted out again in 1985 and re-recorded by Whitney Houston. The song is The Greatest Love of All. And that case was settled out of court. It did not include Lightfoot's name being added to the songwriter's credits, but given the success of the single, a top 10 in a dozen countries and sales of over 2.5 million copies, plus all the royalties derived from the parent album, which sold somewhere north of 25 million copies, he must have made a ton of money from a song he really didn't write, except for that maybe plagiarized bit.
Alan, just before you go, there are many people who have been very much affected by Gordon Lightfoot and his music. And there are also folks out there who may not have that same context. What would you say to folks who didn't grow up to Gordon Lightfoot and his music and the love that he has gotten? What would you say to them about why Gordon Lightfoot is so revered and is important to Canadian culture?
Great question. I'll put it as an analogy. You know how everybody felt when Gord Downie died? Mm-hmm. Same thing. Gord Downie was this generation's Gordon Lightfoot. In fact, if there was no Gordon Lightfoot, there would not have been a Gord Downie. These are people who were able to somehow encapsulate so much about Canada in what they did, what they sang, and where they went. So when Gord Downie died, the best tweet I saw was, "Canada closed, death in the family." We could recycle that tweet today.
Really good of you to come on the show today, Alan. Thank you, and take good care.
You're very welcome.
Alan Cross, music writer, host of the syndicated show, The Ongoing History of New Music.